Hello and welcome to the Longev Lens. Please join my co-host, Dr. Sebastian Pedersen and I as we cut through the noise and hype around longevity, health and wellness and turn the latest evidence into honest, practical insight for living better for longer.
And just a quick disclaimer before we dive in, this podcast is for educational purposes only and doesn't constitute medical advice. If you have a healthcare problem, please consult your doctor or qualified healthcare professional.
Welcome back to the Longev Lens, where we cut through all the noise and hype around health, longevity and well-being. Today we've got our rapid fire segment. It's actually part 2, where we're following up with a lot of the treatments of bone health, and we've got Belinda Beck to wrap things up with us with her program, her background in the studies, and how we can actually implement all of these protocols as well. So again, we feel very excited at this part. We've actually finally built up to this now. We've spoken about the physiological mechanisms, the breakdowns of bone happens through the decades as well, how we can actually load it. But what specifically can we now do for people loading, considering exercise is the most effective, even comparatively to medications? What sort of the things that people should be focusing on with loading for exercise?
So possibly the place to start is what not to do. And I always say, I'm not saying that swimming and cycling and walking are bad. I'm absolutely not. They're great for 5 days a week. But if you want to improve your bone mass, at least 2 days a week, you need to be lifting. Yep. You need to be lifting heavy and you need to be doing some impact exercise. So this is, if you have low bone mass, you must be supervised because it needs to be done carefully. But I guess when you're young, nothing's off the table really, because most kids are pretty robust and they're not at risk of fracture. They're relatively agile. They're able to stop themselves from falling, and if they do fall, it's not like a tree toppling. They just they don't go down with such force. So if you're somebody who's in charge of little kids and you're trying to increase their peak bone mass, you want to get them as active as possible, doing anything, and particularly something that you think that they might love to do for their whole life. Now, if that thing turns out to be swimming or marathon running, then you're going to have to try and insert something else, because those are not going to do their bones any favors, particularly when they're growing. So if you do have that crazy swimmer who's swimming 5 times a week, then you need to be thinking about some alternative activity that's loading the bones more, weight-bearing loading. I had the exact situation with my daughter, who was a swimmer, and she played hockey and she ran cross-country and also did climbing. So she had a varied sort of, loading pattern. Once you're into adulthood, it's sort of the same prescription. If you're young and healthy, do as much as you can, particularly weight-bearing exercise, as much variety as possible. Playing basketball and netball, volleyball and tennis, those are actually great activities because there's a lot of varied movement and bone loves that. But also with things like basketball, there's a lot of jumping and landing on hard surfaces. Bone loves that. So those things are great. But also start getting into the habit of getting into the gym and lifting heavy your whole life. If you do that, you're going to get into old age and you won't have the problem. But if you are now in old age and you do have the problem, those same sort of recommendations apply, but you're going to have to be much, much more careful. My auntie broke her ankle playing tennis, so you because she had low bone mass. So you need to be more careful of perhaps staying away from things that might make you fall if you're very fragile, but nothing should keep you from lifting weights.
Agreed. And there's a lot of other, like exercise is obviously the biggest one, but heaps of other low-hanging fruit for bone health. Don't smoke, don't drink. If you have medical conditions, especially inflammatory conditions, if you have issues with your thyroid, if you're on medications, there's a lot of medications that actually directly reduce bone density. So it's a matter of really just from first principles, yes, definitely do the loading, but make sure you're aware of or reversing or managing any pre-existing conditions or medications or lifestyle behaviours that impacts bone health for many, many years to come.
What sort of medications reduce bone?
Like some of the antacid medications, you have a lot of the Steroids is a massive one, especially from young children, even like inhaled steroids, but a lot of topical steroids, tablet steroids. So there's a whole brackets, anti-epileptic, mental health medications. There's big classes of medication that directly impact bone mineral density.
And cancer drugs.
Yeah, exactly.
Aromatase inhibitors are terrible.
Right. Exactly right. Yep.
Before you said it sounds like running's not enough. The loading on running you would expect to think would be enough. How come that hasn't been able to be replicated into bone health quite as much?
Yeah, it's interesting. We tend to think of running as a high impact activity, especially if you're not a runner and you run, it feels like everything's jarring. But most runners who run a lot are actually like little coils, little springs, and they use their their tendons and their joint bending to absorb the shock. So they're not getting a huge amount of shock. You will get, more than just walking if you're running, for sure. And I should say, I believe a lifetime of running is protective, but just starting to run, if you have low bone mass, number one, it's going to be painful. Number two, you might hurt yourself. And number three, it's not going to be very effective.
So what's the difference between jumping and running?
The actual force that your bone perceives. So if you remember, I was talking about the bending of bone and deforming bone and creating strain in bone. The impact force that you get on your bones when you land from a jump is much higher, in the order of sort of 4 body weights to even higher. If you're a gymnast, it can go up as high as 20 body weights. But for running, it's actually quite low. So 1.5 on each foot body weight if you're taking a lot of that strain with a nice running movement.
What about, like, my curiosity is always, yes, we're loading the bones is obviously the biggest thing, but bones don't increase their density. They don't build when you're exercising. It's during the recovery or the rest period. So from your experience, obviously nutrition is massive, making sure you get enough protein, calcium, vitamin D, but also sleep. Like, has that ever been included in your studies to make sure you control for nutritional behaviours as well as sleep quality?
So we haven't been able to control sleep because it is very difficult to accurately measure, and the numbers have to be much higher than the numbers we typically have in our studies. It's an interesting question, and it's probably something that I need to incorporate at the clinic. We probably could do better with our sleep measures there. I agree with you that sleep is a vastly undervalued characteristic of our health milieu. More than that, I can't say because we don't have the data. But I do agree with you on the building blocks, the nutritional building blocks. Certainly our data shows that if you're not getting enough calcium, you will still respond, but you won't respond as much as if you have the recommended amount of calcium every day.
And that's where, for me, being objective is very important. So we do a lot of testing, obviously, from DEXAs to blood testing to make sure our people's vitamin D has been optimized. Calcium, if we just focus on bone, don't think about cardiac. Great evidence, 1.2 grams a day of calcium. Vitamin D, personally, is a bit of a longer range. I personally aim for about a level of 100 to 150, a bit narrower. Usually the guidelines about 50 to 150. I try to sort of aim in the top half of that. Vitamin K, sometimes I test for as well, but then protein, making sure people get sufficient protein. But I think from my experience now in our demographic and who I've seen previously, it's not only protein. I think protein is under-recognised, also maybe emphasised a bit too much, because we need protein to build bones. Bones, collagen, which is protein, so we need that. But also making sure that people who are on a very high protein diet aren't just using all of their protein for metabolism or for energy. So I do try to incorporate carbohydrates. Exactly right, carbohydrates, to make sure, yes, your body is using carbohydrates, but the protein you're consuming is actually used to build muscle, to build bone, rather than just focusing only on protein.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like you said before, the bone loading, well, muscle is attached to bone. There's very much that push-pull contraction of it that's going to help to create that shearing, loading into the bone as well.
Yeah, muscle contributes, but it is a really complex relationship, and it's not always intuitive. So we know that muscle can load bone, and it can load it even higher than ground reaction forces. The modelling shows us that. However, oftentimes muscles contract in opposition to splint the bone.
Yeah, okay.
So,
Yep,
and
yep,
if you
yep, yep.
have them if that happens on either side, it's actually unloading the bone in some cases. And also muscles work in unusual ways and sometimes unpredictable ways at the hip. So there is some data that suggests you would think that, the hip, the total hip machine that you can use in the gym, that does hip flexion, hip extension,
Yeah.
abduction and adduction.
Yeah.
It shows that you get, this modelling shows that you get more force from walking than you do from an adduction force, because the muscles on either side nullify, cancel each other's out. So it's not always intuitive.
So how should people be really loading their bone? Because we obviously need a fair bit of load, like you've alluded to before. How will people intuitively know that they need to hit a certain number to be able to make sure they are improving their bone density? Because it's considerably more, like I said before, Pilates really isn't changing bone at all. If anything, it's actually making it worse.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's making it worse. And one thing, just before I answer that question, that you have reminded me, Pilates, I'm not anti-Pilates. Pilates is fantastic because it will probably help to prevent falls. And that's the other element about exercise that is so incredibly important. Keeping your muscles strong, staying agile and keeping your neuromuscular health good is going to prevent those falls. The answer to the question about intensity is you need to be up in what we call the sort of 80% one repetition max. That means 80% of what you can lift in total is what you're aiming for to be able to do 5 times. Now, that is not something that you just walk into a gym and do, and it's not something that anyone who hasn't done it before should do unsupervised. This is 100%. This is something that you should do supervised. I would say the exercises that we chose, and the reason we chose the exercises for the Neuro program is because they're functional. These are things that will help people lift up a heavy washing basket full of wet clothes, or it will help them sit down on the toilet without falling, or getting in and out of a car. So these are exercises, these are large compound movements where you're using a lot of muscles together. Grabbing a dumbbell and doing these ones with your biceps, don't waste your time. Why are you doing that? That muscle there is really not anything to do with the primary sites that are likely to break.
Yeah, exactly.
So big compound movements that are functional that you're going to be using during the day are the way to go.
Yep, I agree. And that's why I prefer to send our clients to Corey rather than get them testing in Sydney or Brisbane for that safety reason. Because if I want them loaded, I need to make sure someone who knows what they're doing is doing exactly what we want them to be doing, rather than just, go do loading and then they come back with an injury and then they can't load for a prolonged period of time, and it just becomes a vicious cycle after that. So.
That's right. And it sort of plays into people's fears that exercise is going to hurt them, and it plays into doctors' fears that exercise is going to hurt them. And we should remember too that people who have never done very much exercise are not familiar with DOMs.
Yeah, exactly.
So they're going to be sore for the first time they do it. It's surprising actually how little soreness you have from Oniro after the first week. But the first week you're going to be a bit sore, but that's normal. There's a bit of inflammation that's causing your nerves to fire, and
exactly right.
and actually you need to embrace that. That's I just did a workout. I'm
Exactly
feeling
right.
it.
Exactly right.
Exactly.
I
right.
agree.
Yeah.
I agree. That's good.
As much as I'd love to continue talking about it, I feel like we could still hit a lot more topics, but we've actually run out of time. So thank you so much. As I said, we feel really excited and fortunate that we could actually have you here in the studio
pleasure.
on the Gold Coast. There's not really too many people around the world that could be able to say and do that. So thank you so much for your time as well. Again.
Delighted to be here.